I'm visiting Chile Estate today. Chile Estate farms 1,800 hectares. Of those 1,800 hectares, 400 is in clover grass like the field we're standing in today. The farm has 800 cows, dairy cows, and is 100% organic driven. I'm following the process with the Fendt full line green harvest equipment from the field to the farm today. Here we are in the cutting grass sequence, which is the first sequence of our forage harvest. And we're doing the fourth cut today here in a mixture of ryegrass and white and red clover, where the clover is actually dominating to some extent. What we see here is the Fendt 724 attached to the Fendt slicer 990, working at a 9 meter working width. What you see is we've adjusted the cutting height here to, I measure just about 9 centimeters height here. And the cutting height is essential because, as I explained before, we're in the fourth cut. And on this farm we expect to do a fifth cut also. And in order to get the regrowth here in the late cut moving, you have to set a fairly high cutting height compared to early in the season. So that's the key here. Speaking of the cutting height, is a key element when you're doing the windrowing here. By adjusting the cutting height, you can actually manipulate the composition of the forage. The lower you cut, the more clover you get. The higher you cut, the more ryegrass will dominate. Of course, you can also manipulate it by the fertilizer regime, where you can increase the nitrogen application and that way suppress the clover to some extent, but that's a different aspect, and we will not go deeper into that today. We are running without the conditioner, so it's just left spread out, and later in the process here on this farm there'll be the tethering. So there's a bit of wind here, which is good for drying. I also want to note more about the cutting height, how to adjust and how to regulate that. When you do that, you also have to look at some other parameters, and here I'm looking at soil contamination. Soil contamination of the forage is one of the elements that increases the ash content. And we all know we want to reduce the ash content. So when you are in the field, look down at the stems of the grass and the forage to see whether you have small specks of soil that have been sort of splashed up by rain or something like that, and adjust your cutting height so that's above that. That way you reduce the ash content in your feed. Another thing you have to take into consideration, as I mentioned before, we are working here today without a conditioner. By adding a conditioner, you can actually, to the slicer mower here, you can actually increase the dry down or reduce the dry down period of the forage. But we have a high amount of clover in this forage, and conditioners can actually hurt and result in leaf loss by the clover if you're using conditioners. So this is consideration that you have to make when you're making decisions on how to do your windrowing here. Some things you have to consider also during the forage harvest is, in order to have a nice clean cut, it's important to have sharp knives. So in this farm here, the first side of the knife is used for 200 hectares. Then the knives are turned on the back side and do another roughly 200 hectares in order to have the knife nice and sharp at all stages. If you are running with dull knives, you will see a damage to the forage and you don't get a clean cut of the grass and clover. And that way the clover and grass will be more susceptible to fungus or extra dryness and reduced and stunned regrowth. So make sure that you have good sharp knife when you're doing the mowing. Other interesting things that you have to consider mowing is that cutting height. Adjust the cutting height for the purpose. This forage grass silage here is done for dairy cows, high yielding dairy cows. So there's a very strong focus on the quality here. But you can also use grass forage for other purposes. For instance, biogas. Forage and silage used for biogas plants is increasing. And here you can actually do a bit of a compromise and increase your yield by reducing the cutting height. In particular, if you're doing the last cut before the field is turned over into a new crop, there can be a significant yield increase by just cutting as low as possible. But the challenge here is that, are your fields level? You have to have level fields in order to cut very close to the ground. Otherwise, you risk of catching stones. You can also have areas where you have different kinds of soil contamination coming into the feed and damaging the forage. Some facts about the mowing here. We are roughly having a fuel consumption at about 10 liters per hectare because we are not using the conditioner. If you use conditioner, your fuel consumption will increase to some extent, but we're just doing a mowing here and it's a light crop, so roughly 10 liters per hectare of fuel consumption. The field efficiency is 9 to 12 hectares per hour, depending on how heavy a crop it is. Here we are roughly about 12 hectares per hour for this Fendt 724, and we have the slicer here. When we're doing the mowing, we also have estimated 1 to 2% of dry matter loss, actually forage we do not retrieve on the headlands, other parts. But we also can induce other dry matter loss. If we are attaching a conditioner, we will normally see 1% dry matter loss due to the conditioner. And that is mainly leaf loss if we have a high clover content.